So you've been thinking about getting Ubiquiti, or maybe you even went out and got a Ubiquiti UDM Pro, but now you're curious about VLANs. Should you incorporate them? Should you build them? How do you even get started? Well, in today's video, we're going to show you exactly that. We're going to show you how to set up a very typical home network, something that we run into or build for people on a common basis. And so hopefully you'll be able to plug in your situation and take away the parts that are relevant to you in this video. Hey guys, welcome to the Ethernet Blueprint channel. My name is Tim Tritch, and on this channel we focus on helping people just like you build a great network into their new construction home. And one of the networks we love is Ubiquiti. And one of the perks of Ubiquiti is its ability to build in VLANs. So in today's video, we're going to dedicate building a network that we really see a lot in our space. And that is just a very common network that has a trusted network, a kids network, an IoT network, and a guest network. And each one of those is going to be its own VLAN. And then we're going to secure the VLAN so the network is secure, but we're going to do it in a way and show you in a way that makes sense so you don't have to be some network engineer. Because once you guys get this set up, for the most part, you don't have to mess with it too often, which is great. And we're going to talk about some things like Sonos and things about controlling your Apple TV with your phone when you're on a different network. Things that really come up on a daily basis now that we live in this technical world. So here in just a minute, I'm going to show you exactly the network that we're going to build. I've pre-built it. We're going to show you around, and then I'm going to wipe it completely out, and we're going to build it again just for you guys so you can see how it's done. So let's get started. So here we go. This is what we're going to build. I wanted you to kind of see the topology of how I have my network connected so you can kind of understand that piece of it. And then this is exactly what we're going to build in our network. So let's go over this real quick. So we have the internet coming in, and I have that going into my UDM Pro into one of my WAN ports. And then one of these 8 LAN ports is actually physically connected into my 16 port switch. The 16 port switch is made up of all PoE ports, and I have 2 access points connected, physically connected there. And then I also have a desktop computer physically connected to the network as well, not shown here, but I'll show you that here in just a second. Now, this is the network we're going to create, and it is currently built right now, which I'll show you here in just a second. But I wanted to show you, so we have this as a reference. This is going to be our reference guide for what we're going to build. So we're going to have a default network. Each of these are VLANs, right? Each of these are going to be their own network. See, they have their own IP address scheme. One is a 192.168.1.x. The next one's 2.x, 3.x, and then 99.x, which basically means each network has its own IP address. So you have to do things on your network that allow these to talk to each other or not talk to each other. And those are some of the things we're going to be talking about with VLAN, some of the pros, some of the cons, and that sort of thing, because this does complicate your network, guys. When you buy a box set, you go buy an Eero or whatever, you get one network. You might get a guest network, but it does it a little bit different. But at the end of the day, you're going to get one. That's it. All your devices connect to one network. There is no VLANing, none of that stuff. So with this will be a little different than what you get with your out of the box. I mean, if you're going to spend more money and get something nicer like this, you get the benefits from it as well. However, I've always said that security is a double-edged sword. It's great to have, but it also creates more work for you and might create some troubleshooting down the line. That's why we created this, guys. You can actually create this thing. Just rename the stuff the way it makes sense to you. This is a very common setup with a default network, which is trusted, kids, and IoT, because we all have devices that we want, that are hackable, that we don't want getting into our network, and then potentially a guest network. But if you don't want a guest network, just leave that part off. No big deal. But this is how they break down, guys. We're going to have a default network right here. This is going to be a trusted network, which basically means we're going to connect our laptops, our work computers, printers to it. Sonos, which I'll talk about Sonos a lot in this video series that we're doing today, because they seem to be a little tricky about this stuff. And I read what are all the tricks with Sonos. And guys, we just kind of have to keep it pretty simple with them, and I'll show you exactly what I mean. But this network will have full access to all other networks, which means if you're on this default network, you can talk to any one of these other networks, no problem, including the guest. And it'll have full internet access, meaning no restrictions on your internet. The kids network is also trusted, and it too will have full access to these other networks. However, with one big change, and that is it's going to have family safe internet turned on. Basically, the kids are going to have their own Wi-Fi, and we're going to restrict their ability to get to adult content and just show them a little bit more family friendly content when they search the web. This is great for young kids because they all have their devices nowadays, and so it's a nice way for you to be able to sort of control what they can get to, or at least keep them out of trouble a little bit, and without looking over their shoulder. We're going to have an IoT network, which is not trusted. Our IoT is going to be our devices. It's going to be our Apple TVs, Chromecasts. It's going to be Alexa devices, things like that, things that don't get patched as often and are a little bit more vulnerable to outside attackers. And so because of that, we kind of want to take this IoT network and put it on its own island. We want it to set off all by itself. We want to get access to the internet because it still needs to, Alexa still needs to be able to tell us the weather or play a song for us, or your TV still needs to be able to stream, but it doesn't need to talk to the default network. However, like I said, our trusted networks can talk to it, and we'll get into that. We are also going to set up the family safety internet on both this one and the guest network because we don't want our kids jumping on those networks to be able to get to adult websites. And so basically, the only network that will have full internet access is our default one. And then we're going to have a guest network, which is also not trusted. We're going to also put family safe internet on, and it's only going to be able to get to the internet and the internet only. Great for babysitters, great for anybody who comes over and checks on the dog and wants to connect to the network while they're there. If you guys travel a lot, something like that, it's a good thing to have. However, if you just want them to connect to the kids or the IoT network, that's your prerogative. But we see this as a pretty common network to build in a home. It kind of covers all the bases, but there's some pros and cons to doing this, and we're going to cover all of that, I promise. So let's switch over to our Ubiquiti network, and I'll show you exactly what this thing looks like. So like we just mentioned, here is going to be our default, our guest, our IoT, and our kids. These are all individual VLANs. You can see the different IP addresses. And then if you come over to Wi-Fi, you're going to be able to see the corresponding Wi-Fi networks that use those networks. So the default network uses default, or the default Wi-Fi uses the default network. Guest uses guest. IoT uses IoT. Wi-Fi for kids uses kids. Okay, so that's how this works. That way, when they're connected to those networks, they have to follow the rules that we put in place on those networks. Okay, if I go into our topology, guys, this is just the Ubiquiti flavor of it. A lot prettier than my Microsoft Paint version, but this is what we look at. We got our Dream Machine Pro, 16-port switch, a couple of access points. We'll have a couple of wired devices, a couple of wireless devices, and then at the end, I'll kind of show you guys what you can ping and what you can't ping and how Ubiquiti specifically handles this. So we're going to keep things very high level, guys. We're not going to get too in the weeds. There are tons of videos online when it comes to VLANing. And so if there's a very specific granular thing you're trying to do, you might have to do a little bit digging. We want to show people that VLANs don't need to be scary. And if you just follow these simple rules, you can actually create a very nice, secure, common network that we run into, and then you can tweak it to your needs. Okay, so we got our devices. We don't need to worry about that. We got our clients. We are going to be going over here into the firewall and security section, and we're going to be creating some rules on our LAN, which is our local area network. But if you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, there's only 4 or 8 total firewall rules that we're going to put in, which is okay. We are going to create some profiles over here that basically we're going to create these as well. So these port IP groups, we're going to create some of those. Those will incorporate into our firewall rules, and I will explain, not try, I will explain kind of what they are and what they mean. Again, keeping it very high level, guys, keeping it very high level. So we're going to go ahead and get started, guys. This is what we're going to build. I'm excited to do this for you. I've been wanting to do a VLAN one for a while, but I wanted to find the right way to do it. I wanted to find the right way to demonstrate to this to you in a way that is not scary, so that the quote unquote everyday non-network IT guy is not afraid to go out and buy some nicer equipment and get it set up in a way that makes sense for their family. This will work with any internet, guys. So whether you got T-Mobile 5G or Cox Internet or Spectrum or Starlink, that is irrelevant. This is how the local network, your house network, is going to run. whatever internet company you have will not affect this at all. And so this is really the guts and the glory of why you spend a little extra money on got a nice Dream Machine Pro, a nice managed switch, things like that, and use access points, because that's an important part of this. And I want to kind of set that up a little bit right now. Is the the switch that you use needs to be able to do VLANs. It needs to be a managed switch. Same thing with your access points, guys. Your access points are learning different Wi-Fi names, and different Wi-Fi names are connected to different networks, so that when you connect on your cell phone, it actually connects and gives you out the right IP address information. So all these things have to work together. Just because I have the Dream Machine Pro that I can build all this on, if you just have a couple of dummy switches and some simple APs that don't do that, or maybe they aren't as compatible with Ubiquiti, then guys, this is going to be a lot harder. By doing things in a way like on a single platform like Ubiquiti, where we have a Ubiquiti switch, Ubiquiti APs, we program it once and everything just learns all at the same time. I don't have to go into 3 different devices or 4 different devices and program my VLANs like I would if I was not using all Ubiquiti gear. So important thing to notate here is one of the reasons this is easy is because we are using all Ubiquiti gear. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. We'll talk about that a little bit more as it comes up. Yeah, we'll kind of go from there. So this is our starting point, guys. This is what we're going to build. Hopefully this part makes sense to you. Hopefully as you kind of look at what we're building, you can be like, yeah, I could see having a network like that. But maybe at the end, maybe you don't worry about the kids thing. You just want to put them on your default network, and you got an IoT network and a guest network. That's fine too. Then we just skip the part that talks about the kids. No big deal. It's very easy to, factor out the things that are not going to be important to you in this video. So guys, we're going to tear it all down. I'm going to rebuild it for you so you can see it all start to finish. We're going to do that right now. So tune in. All right, guys, here we go. We're going to get started with this. So I've completely wiped out the configuration except for the default Wi-Fi. The default network. So there is a default Wi-Fi and there is a default network. That is it. All the firewall rules have gone back to the original ones. There are no profiles in here anymore for port IP groups. So everything is back the way it was when we first set this thing up. So a couple things I want you to know before we get started as it pertains to VLANs. So basically, let's talk about what a VLAN is. So when you have a VLAN, you have these separate networks in here. A VLAN basically is separating your traffic. So unless you say it's okay for the kids network to talk to the default network, or the kids network to talk to the IoT network, basically that traffic, it's kind of like sticking it on its own lane of the highway. You have your default lane highway, you have your kids network, you have your IoT network highway lane, and you have your guest network lane. Now, the default lane can put their car in any one of the lanes they want, right? They can talk to any of the cars they want. But the IoT network, for example, really can just go straight. That's it. Go to the internet and that's it. It can't talk to any of the other cars in any of the other lanes. Now, what does that do for us? One, it creates security, right? If you don't have stuff talking across networks, then it is more secure. You can stick things in these more secure or non-trusted networks, and it will protect the rest of your network. Nobody wants their Alexa to get hacked and be able to get their banking information because the Alexa and the home network are on the same network, right? So if Alexa gets hacked and it gives the attacker the ability to see the devices on the network, that would mean a laptop. That would maybe mean TVs. That would maybe mean computers or phones. Depending on what these hacks give the attackers the ability to do, that would open up these doors. However, if the Alexa gets hacked and it's in its own lane, it can see other IoT devices, which also don't have access to anything. I mean, when attackers get in a network, they want banking information, they want that kind of stuff. They don't want to find out what your favorite music is that you listen to on your Alexa, or find out what the weather is, type of thing. So they're looking for confidential information. So by separating that traffic, you actually create security between your networks. Now, like I've always said, security is a double-edged sword. It makes you feel warm and cozy, but you may run into instances where you need 2 things to talk to each other and you have to make a decision. And one of the areas that we did that on is Sonos. to me, Sonos is a device that is sort of hackable. They've already proven that it can be hacked and gotten into. However, the way Sonos works and the way it uses multicast and some of these other things that makes it all work so you can run it from your cell phone and everything is um, uh, to make it work in its own lane, it breaks it. So technically, it will still be sort of protected, but we've just found the easiest way to use Sonos and incorporate Sonos in your home is to kind of take a chance and just let it be on the trusted network. Otherwise, you can lose connectivity. Some of the speakers might work, some might not. You might lose control. You can't do things from a PC. I mean, just all sorts of Sonos kind of has its own little things. Now, I did see some videos and looked at some configurations, and they give a big long list of firewall rules that if you really did want to isolate your Sonos, you absolutely can. But we're trying to keep this pretty high level. So for this layout, our Sonos will be on the default network. It'll be on a trusted network, unlike a lot of our other IoT devices like Apple TVs, smart TVs, Fire Sticks, Roku's, that sort of thing. So just kind of keep that in mind. And if you don't like that idea, then you might have to check out some other videos that really dive in and allow you to secure that Sonos network even more. But Sonos just gives us a lot of problems if it doesn't just have full access to the network. It really, really does. It's kind of designed to work a certain way, and it kind of has its own set of rules it plays by. So I'm yet to hear of any of our customers Sonos getting hacked, but I've heard of it happening before. So again, full disclosure, you are taking a little bit of a risk by setting it up this way. We are not going to isolate our Sonos network on the IoT network. Okay. All right, guys. So this is what we're going to start building here. This is what we're going to do. Oh, I was going to talk. The second thing about why we incorporate VLANs is because it makes your traffic run better, right? If you only have to deal with the default cars on the road and the kids only have to deal with the kids' cars on the road and the IoT only have to deal with their cars on the road and vice versa, that means every car can get where it's going even faster, right? Because it's not everybody, all your cars on one highway, right? And most houses don't generate enough traffic to really create true congestion. However, it does happen. It does happen. And houses are getting more and more devices in them, and we really don't see that letting up soon. So by isolating some of that traffic and separating it, you're doing just that, and the traffic can move more freely because it doesn't have as many cars on the road. So there's some definite benefits to using VLANs here, guys, and we really like using them. And so that's why we want to show you guys how to do it. Let's go ahead and get started. I want to go ahead and get things rolling. So the first thing we're going to do is go in and build our networks. Okay, so we have our default network. We're going to build our kids network, and we're going to build in our IoT and our guest network. And let's go ahead and do that first. So we're going to go over into settings gear. We're going to go to networks, and we're going to create a network. Okay, so we're going to create a network, and this network we're going to create is going to be kids. So we'll call this kids network. This is not the Wi-Fi. This is the actual VLAN. We're going to call this VLAN Kids Network. Now, we want this network to be a 2.1 network. It chose that for us, but if it didn't choose it for us, we could come in here and type it. And then we also want this to be VLAN 2. We want the name of our VLAN to match our IP scheme. So this is our IP address of this VLAN. And this is the VLAN ID. We want these two to match. If this was a 192.168.3.1, which we're going to build for IoT, we want it to be VLAN 3, 2, 2, 3, 3, 5, 5, 99, 99. You'll see as we get going. All right, so this is our kids network. Now, we are going to set the content filtering right here. We're basically saying, I don't care if the kids are on a physical connection or Wi-Fi. Anything that is on the kids VLAN gets family rules, and that's where this is done at. So if I hover over this, you can see it blocks VPNs, explicit pornographic and malicious domains, search engines, and YouTube are set to safe mode. So if the kids Google boobs, it shouldn't result a bunch of nudity. It should block most of that. Now, none of these are perfect, but I found that it does a pretty good job. It does a pretty good job. So it is going to be a standard network. We're not making a guest. Standard network with family built into it. Okay. And we're just going to go ahead and hit next or add network. Okay. So So that's being done. If I go over here to my devices, you can see my Dream Machine Pro is learning, and so is my switch automatically. I just hit save, and all my devices that need to know about these changes are learning about them. Okay, so that's going to be kind of a common thing we're going to talk about. Okay, so we're going to add a new network. We're going to call this the IoT network. Guys, I don't know if you guys know what IoT stands for Internet of Things. It's kind of this category name that they've kind of lumped a lot of things, a lot of smart devices into, or smart speakers and smart TVs and stuff like that. It's kind of this Internet of Things, these things that have access to the internet, which is what IoT stands for, in case you were ever wondering. Okay, so we're going to just uncheck the auto scale. This is 3.1, which is exactly what matches over here. 3.IoT was 3.x. Okay. And if we come down here and switch this to manual, so this ungrays out, that's VLAN 3. That's what we want to be. And we also want this to be protected with family because we don't want our kids to jump over to the IoT network. You know, let's take this, let's break this down. Let's think about this for a second. In this scenario, your kids probably set up a lot of the devices for you guys, right? I mean, you get a new Alexa, they set it up, they get it on the network. So they probably are going to know the network password, the Wi-Fi password to the IoT devices so they can help you guys set things up or manage it or reset it or troubleshoot it, whatever. They're going to know. So we want this to have the same family restrictions as their own network so they don't just jump over here to get to the stuff that they're not supposed to. Now, kids are smart. They will do this stuff. It's really crazy about how smart they are. Okay. So that's why we're doing it this way. It's being an IT professional has kind of forced me to think like a kid. What would I Google? What would I do to try and beat this? So this is what we're doing to beat it. So we're going to add network. Okay. And the last network is going to be our guest network. So, and remember, these are our VLANs. These are just the name of our VLANs. I could, instead of saying guest network, I could say guest VLAN and it would be the same thing. So guest network, auto scale. I'm going to turn this off and I don't want this to be 4. We want this to be 99. So I'm going to change that to 99. It automatically updates down here. And then we're going to change the VLAN ID to 99 as well. So it matches. So 99, 99. This is going to be a guest network. Okay. We're going to also put family restrictions in. So your house sitter, your dog sitter, whatever is not getting to any websites they're not supposed to. Okay. While you're gone. And there. So that's that. And we got that network added. That is it, guys. All the VLANs are created and our devices are learning as we go. Right here, as you can see, our devices are learning. Okay, so we'll wait for those to turn green. Should just take a second here. All right, all green, everything's good to go. This is one of the things I like about Ubiquiti. It does a really good job of making this part really easy. It tells you what status, it tells you when it's doing things. It just does a really good job of letting you know what's going on. Okay, so now we're going to go back into settings. We're going to create our Wi-Fi network. So we have all our VLANs. We need Wi-Fi tied and connected to those VLANs. So if you look at our default Wi-Fi here, you can see it is connected to the default network, but we have all these other choices. See, now we have multiple choices for our network in the dropdown, but we want it to be on default and we want it to be on all IPs, all the access points to learn about it. Okay. All right, so let's go back and we're going to create a new Wi-Fi network. This one is going to be Wi-Fi for kids, is what I called it. Wi-Fi for kids. Password. This one we're going to do different, right? So 987654321. Now, let's talk about why we're making this one different than all the other ones. If you look at our little scenario here, we want the kids to be on the kids network, or we want them to only know the passwords to the networks they know about, right? That means that if you set up this scenario in your house, this default Wi-Fi has to be top secret, right? Your kids can't know about it because it has access to everything and can get to anywhere on the internet, anywhere. Okay. We're not going to try to restrict you parents. You guys are grown up, you're adults, you can handle these things. And as your kids get older and maybe outgrow some of the kids' restrictions, then you could potentially let them know at that time or change it at that time or whatever. But it's one of those things where we want the kids network to be different because we want them to know about their own and not about ours in this scenario. And maybe that alone is a reason not to do this. Or maybe you're not going to build the kids network. You're just going to have the default, the IoT, and the guest network. And if that's the case, then it's kind of irrelevant, but that's okay. We have a lot of, I mean, let's face it, kids are born with a tablet in their hand nowadays. And so we want to make sure that if you're cooking dinner and they're, entertaining themselves, that they're not getting the things they're not supposed to. And so this will definitely help with that. Okay, so we've set that. We set our password, which is 987654321. Again, horrible password. Don't use it. I'm going to switch this to manual. All right, so we're not going to do anything crazy here. We're not going to do any 5 gigahertz or 2.4 onlys or anything. So we are going to leave those on. This is a standard network, just like we want. We are going to leave band steering turned on, which band steering, basically, if I hover over this, it says forces compatible clients to move to the 5 gigahertz, which is the faster Wi-Fi band, to improve network performance. This is great on a laptop or a phone or any of those things. However, on the IoT network that we're going to build, we're going to shut this off, because we just find that even if it's turned on, we find that a lot of IoT devices can't connect to the network at all, and it creates problems. So we're going to turn that off. But for our kids and our default, we'll leave it on. Our guest, we'll leave it on. Most guests are going to be connecting with a laptop or a phone. All right, so this is a standard network. Band steering can stay on. Bandwidth profile, we don't need to worry about any of this other stuff, right? Everything else in here is just fine. So we're going to add that network. Oh, network is offline. What happened? Quick, we're going to go to settings. Let's see where we left off. Wi-Fi. Okay, so we got to create the kids network again. All right, so we are going to go into Wi-Fi for kids. 987654321. You guys get to see this again if you want. The network is going to be kids. All those, all this, everything is good. Good. Now, you notice in here, it doesn't ask us about the family thing. Well, that's because we did that on the VLAN itself, on the network. It doesn't matter if you're connected Wi-Fi or with a physical switch. If that was a Wi-Fi only setting, then the kids could just plug in a cable to the switch and beat it. But this way, they can't. So we're going to go ahead and add that. All right. I'm going to go ahead and add the IoT network a little quicker. So we got IoT Wi-Fi. Okay. Password 123456789. The network is going to be IoT. It's going to be on all access points. Go in here. It's going to be both 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. I am going to turn off band steering, okay, like we talked about. And we're going to go ahead and say next. And now I'm going to create the guest network. So this is going to be called guest Wi-Fi. Password is going to be 9 nines, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Again, a different password because your guests don't need to know your password. So here's another kind of downside to doing this, guys. If you really look at this over here, you have 4 different Wi-Fi networks and 3 different passwords in this scenario, or maybe even 4 different passwords if that's the way you set it up. So now you got to remember, okay, guest was this, IoT was this. It's more to keep straight. It is. This complicates your life a little bit. At least with Eero, you have one name, one Wi-Fi password, and that's it. Maybe a guest network as well that has a different password, but that's 2. Now you have 4 different networks that you're going to try and have to keep straight. So just kind of keep that in mind when you're building these. Maybe yours only has 3 and it's not as bad, but at the end of the day, just kind of bear that in mind. Also, if you didn't want a guest network and you don't want a kids network, you just wanted to isolate your IoT, then you're pretty good. You got a default and you got an IoT. Maybe that's not so bad. So it kind of just depends on what flavor you're doing in here. But we're going to go ahead and do our guest network. That's going to be our guest password, 5 nines or 9 nines, excuse me. I'm going to come in here. Everything is going to be, but I'm going to switch the Wi-Fi type to a guest hotspot. And when you do this, by default, clients will be isolated from all internal networks. And we have also enabled client device isolation for the SSID. So even guests can't talk to other guests on your network. So these are built-in firewall rules that automatically happen when you say the type of a network is a guest network. Now you could do that with your IoT network, really. You could create an IoT network and isolate it like that. However, we still want our other devices to be able to communicate with the IoT network. Really, I mean, I don't need to communicate with a guest laptop. There's no reason for that. So I'm not going to do it that way, but I have seen people do that way and then tweak the rules so that their main network can talk to those isolated devices. I find that's a little harder to do. So we're actually just going to create our rules, and you'll see it's not that complicated, and you can still lock it down pretty good with just a couple rules. So we'll go ahead and add this one. All right. So now we got that. If you go over here, you can see my ceiling access point, my in-wall access point. They are learning their new Wi-Fi names and networks and passwords, all just by hitting go. And that, again, just ties into using Ubiquiti products across the board. If you had different networks that you were going in here, you'd be logging into a completely different system to set up your Wi-Fi, set up the individual networks and all that stuff. And it just makes things a little bit more complicated. It just does. So now if I click down here on my Wi-Fi network and I search for Wi-Fi, I'm not going to change to it, but you see Wi-Fi for kids, default Wi-Fi, IoT Wi-Fi, and guest Wi-Fi. Okay. These are all being broadcast right here in my lab right now. Now, here's something I want to show you right now out the gate that ties into what we're saying. Let's check my time here. Okay, I got about 5 more minutes, and then I'm gonna have to kind of. My recording software gives me 30-minute windows at a time, so I'm gonna have to kind of slice this together. I just don't want it to cut off in the middle of what we're talking about. But let me, to end this video here, this section of the video, I'm gonna show you one thing. So if I go into my 16-port switch, so I went over to devices, and I'm going to go into my 16-port switch. You can see if I go to my ports, I can go to port manager here, right? So here's the ports that are hot. If I go to my port manager, I can click into a port. So I can click into whatever, port 8 here. And then here's the port profile. I can change that to a network. See? IoT, guest, kids, LAN. So, or I could disable it. I could turn off the port if I don't want it to be enabled. If I don't want someone to be able to just go plug in, if I don't want a kid to plug into things. So if you're doing this for security reasons, here's why I'm telling you. You're doing VLANs for security reasons. You're not only securing your Wi-Fi, you also need to secure your switch. Now, if the part you like about this is the kids part, right? Maybe, and they have an Xbox. Okay, the Xbox is lucky and has a physical connection because you guys watched my other videos and you wired it in, and this thing has a physical connection. It's not even connected to the Wi-Fi because you want your kids to have a great Xboxing experience. Guys, you're going to want to go over here, find which port the Xbox is plugged into, and switch it to the kids network. Otherwise, the kid's going to have access to porn on his Xbox, or at least I think they can. I don't know. It's amazing what these things can do. They have browsers in them and all sorts of crazy stuff. We see kids getting all sorts of trouble with their Xboxes and their PlayStations. So, guys, this is step 2. Let's put all of those devices, all the kids' devices, in a kids group. And that's how you do it. So you just literally would pick which network you wanted each one of these ports to be on. You can do multiple at once. So I can check every open port on here and put it in the kids network. So if if all intents and purposes, if they plug into any one of these ports, they will automatically get a kids port. And if by chance I need one to be on the default network, I could just go in and change it before I plug it in. Because remember, the kids won't have access to this, only you will. So I can come in here and put every one of these ports on the kids network, apply my changes, and now all of those ports are going to be on the kids network. You can see them right here, kids network, kids network, kids network. So see how that works? Port 1, the desktop PC, is on the LAN. It's on the main, it's on the default network. It's not on all. Now, something you need to know, guys, just as general IT rule number 1, if you have access points, your access points need to be on the all or the trunk or whatever your system uses. They need to be able to see all the VLANs. That's basically what this means. All. I can see all the networks. If you just put your AP in the kids VLAN, it's going to pull an IP. It will be online. You'll be able to connect to it, but it will not be able to do the other VLANs. It needs to be in the all group with Ubiquiti, okay? That means it can see all the VLANs, all of them. But these devices here, plug the Xbox in, plug the kid's laptop in, whatever, knock it out. If one of these is your office computer, you can always go in and switch it, right? So just a little thing, if we're doing this for security, I wanted you to be aware of. Okay, so hopefully we got a fairly good understanding. Quick recap, we built our VLANs really fast, and here's our VLANs. We built our VLANs and we built our Wi-Fi networks. In the next part of this video, we're going to get into the firewall rules. So go get yourself a sip of coffee, grab a beer, whatever it is that you do before you start networking stuff, and we're going to get started here. Okay.